From the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's Just the Tipsters with Melissa Morgan.
Nasal irrigation.
Remember, if you've got a tip for Melissa, a knock on the door you refuse to answer, the abandoned microbus in the vacant lot down the street, a socially acceptable way to eat the butt out of a chocolate bunny, anything, tell us about it by calling the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837, or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. You just might hear your tip on the podcast. And now here's your host. If she doesn't win the Easter egg coloring contest this year, she will go full carry on your ass, Melissa Morgan.
More cowbell. It took me a second to get the reference. I was like, our friend Carrie? Does she get? She spells her name differently.
With a K.
I'm like,
yeah, this is
does she get upset if I don't win? I don't know what that means exactly, but
this is the other Carrie.
Yeah. I get it now. Yeah,
right.
I understand.
Only when you go full Carrie, it's not blood. It's kind of red dye number 2, I think.
Red dye number 7. It's the one that we use for red velvet cake.
Exactly. Right.
I'm thinking. So nasal irrigation refers to possibly my favorite review, and we have gotten some really great ones recently.
We have. It's been a great run.
But this one was from DNR Travel, which makes me giggle because it's like, do not resuscitate. I don't know. It probably doesn't mean that. But that review was titled Nose Douching Intros.
It's a great title.
And the review is, I don't even remember how I stumbled upon this podcast, but I'm so deep into it now and I can't find my way out. Send food and beer. I typically bloop bloop over intros, but producer Mark is a genius, all capitalized, in parentheses, not a paid endorsement, and recently caused mouthwash to stream straight from my nose and onto the mirror with his autopsiesareus.com refund intro. And then the last sentence says, oh, and Melissa's great too. So
now, wait a
that
minute.
is my favorite review because it is producer Mark centric.
Uh-huh.
It is all about him, and he finally gets the credit he deserves for making mouthwash come out of poor DNR Travel's nostrils.
Yeah, well, I don't think he listens to the podcast, though, just for the intros. I don't get that impression.
I just think it's hilarious that the last sentence is, oh, and Melissa's great too.
Well,
thanks.
DNR Travel, thank you, but, Melissa's the star of the show.
Oh,
Come
stop.
on.
Go on. Stop it.
Come on.
There's no stars here.
Oh, yes, there are.
No, I might act like a, petulant brat, but yeah, there's no stars here. I could never do this if it weren't for you. You make it sound so much better than I ever could by myself, and you're the nasal irrigation wind beneath my wings.
That's what they call me.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I call you. We wanted to also thank Green 3 Butterfly. These are all on Apple Podcasts, and Pinned Art. Really sweet, kind. Pinned Art is funny because Pinned Art says that I'm long-winded, which is funny because I'm not really, I don't know how to.
I don't know where you get that.
I don't know how to host it without talking.
No, but you're not long-winded. You're
apparently
interesting.
The intros are too long.
No.
But Green 3 Butterfly, an exquisite review, and we are so grateful. Thank you for that. We have a couple of new YouTube subscribers. Leonidas, the Monkeys. It's spelled traditionally, so I don't think it's Mickey Dolenz, but I don't know. And Aaron, spelled beautifully, Aryn. I love that spelling. So new YouTube subscribers, wonderful new reviews, really grateful. If you have a moment and you enjoy this podcast, this is how other people find us. They can find reviews on Apple Podcasts or ratings. We would prefer you take a moment and write a review, but we are so grateful for anyone who takes the time to support us in this way. And you can do that, as I said, on Apple Podcasts or wherever you are listening to this podcast. Please feel free to email us. We've gotten some really great emails this week from Tipster Kim and from Tipster Ann at jttipsters@gmail.com. You can even call us on the Tipster hotline at 832-847-7837. That's 832-TIPSTER. And we love hearing from you. And I have Corrections Corner. Last week I said, when producer Mark mentioned the history of swear words, and I couldn't remember the name for the female anatomy, and I said Gretchen Twatwaffle, which is not. It's Cecily Bum Trinket.
I can't figure out which one I like better.
I know. Cecily Bum Trinket is pretty good. But yeah, Gretchen Twatwaffle came out of my butthole, so to speak. However, Tipster Emily, I believe, leveled up and sent us this phenomenal list. Did you know that slang terms for sex from the 16th to the 19th century included such priceless gems as fadoodling, horizontal refreshment,
That's good.
play at couch quail, join giblets, have your corn ground,
Oh, dear.
ride a dragon upon St. George.
Oh,
It's a little
my.
long, but here's my favorite.
Oh.
Shot twixt wind and water.
Wow. Now that's poetic.
Shot twixt wind and water.
Indeed.
Yeah. Right.
mean-
And that's actually a very apt map if anyone needs a map for,
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I thought that was
It's like a road atlas.
priceless. I mean, I don't, have your corn ground sounds a little more modern.
Well, and it's just a tiny bit violent. I don't think I like that one.
Oh, I didn't think of it actually as violent. I do have to say this, and this will let you know the naivete of your host. So I was probably 13 or 14, and I had a favorite hairstylist in Florence, Kentucky. And she and her brother owned a salon on Dream Street in Florence, Kentucky. And I was really picky, and I still am. I know, hard to believe. And I would go like once a month and have her do some magic. And she talked about her boyfriend, and I mean, she was, like in her 30s or something. And she said, she called him and said, I need my grass mowed. And I'm thinking she needed her grass mowed. And he said, well, I'll be over and mow your grass. And she's just laughing. And I'm like, well, that's really nice. Do you have a riding mower or not getting at all? Apparently, and producer Mark is
my
laughing.
God.
So have you heard that?
Well, yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
you
it's-
have. All right.
but
Maybe
it's-
it was just
Well, I mean,
I don't
there's that Buck Owens song that you like called "Who's Gonna Mow,
mow your grass.
Mow your grass.
Your grass.
Right.
Yeah. Good point. I didn't think Buck Owens was referring to the vagina, but I don't know.
You never know.
Yeah.
But she was saying this to a 14-year-old girl.
Yeah.
Okay.
She thought it was. Here's the other thing. I think I looked much older.
Oh, okay.
But my mom had to drop me off, so I couldn't drive. She was aware. Maybe she just thought I didn't have a license. I think I always looked older because I was like very tall by the 7th grade.
Oh, man. The thing I love about this podcast, I've said this before, the thing I love about this podcast is I learned so much about you that I never knew before. I mean,
that I'm horribly naive and didn't know.
well, just fun facts about Melissa.
that I thought she really wanted like landscaping done on the outside of her house. No, shut up. Oh God, I know what was going to happen.
Never
knew what was
mind.
going to happen.
We always go here. We
Yeah.
always pull up this driveway.
Who's? I think you squeal up on 2 wheels. I think it's you.
And we always open up the automatic garage door opener, and there we go.
And then drive through the back wall into the pool.
Yeah, that's right.
That's what we have an Audi 5000. I'm just going to put my foot on the gas.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So yeah, who's going to mow your grass and who's going to grind your corn? Gretchen Bum Trinket. No,
Yeah.
Cecily Bum Trinket. I'm mixing metaphors.
Oh my.
Gretchen Twatwaffle is kind of funny though.
Gretchen is the part that makes it funny.
You are welcome.
Thank you.
So the case this week, I just had to cover a case that has been adjudicated. Sometimes I can't take it anymore. And I keep getting amazing cases sent to us that I'm unaware of, that I'm finding out more and more. And we have some real scintillating things coming up in the next few weeks. But this case was sent to us from a tipster who it's a rare opportunity because this tipster was more intimately involved, at least in finding the body of the poor victim, Jessica Sacco. And this is for the local Ohio peeps. And unfortunately, it affects peeps in Cincinnati and in northern Kentucky because Jessica was dismembered and a group of awful creatures did terrible things to this poor girl. So I'm going to be going a little bit back and forth in time because the perpetrator, the main perpetrator, also got, while in prison, got a second sentence for a different offense, but it adds on to his sentence. So, and it was also, unfortunately, at the same time, within a month or so of what happened to Jessica. So Jessica Sacco, beautiful young girl, grew up in California, and a year or so before her death at 21, she was, a few months away from turning 22. She and her family had moved to Ohio. So they settle into Urbana, Ohio, and she rents, her mom actually said, "Why don't you come here and I will help you out?" Now, Jessica was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and she, went through depression and had trouble getting her meds, to the right level, but she was finally on what her mother, Sue Tainer, hoped was a better path. So she brings her out to Ohio. She pays to rent part of one half of a duplex. It's a little one-story duplex. It looks like a really cute kind of a half of a house that you would want to live in as a 21-year-old girl. And she had found online, unfortunately, I really hate to say that, on Facebook, a man named Matthew Puccio, who was also from California. He had moved around quite a bit and says that, he was raised by his grandparents, had lived with his biological father for a while until there was an argument, then lived in different group homes. So he had a difficult past. However, it does not explain why he did what he did. A lot of us have had difficult pasts. A lot of us have difficult presents. And you know what? We don't do terrible things to other people. We get through sometimes with the help of our friends or a doctor or even just ourselves, dragging ourselves by our hair through our lives until we get better. And he didn't want to do that. Matthew Puccio took it out on others. So I believe that the tipster who sent in this story wanted it to be known that, and it's heartbreaking and I hate to even mention it, but that the group of people who killed Jessica were members of the Insane Clown Posse, the group, the Juggalos. Now, what their motto is that, we take care of each other. We, Juggalos take care of each other. I believe that the tipster who sent this in wanted it known because the tipster knows how close the Will Sarazan case is to my heart. And we have a little update this week on Will's case. His murderous nephew, Daniel, who was also a Juggalo. I would call him Juggalo adjacent. I don't even think the Juggalos accepted him, which is to let you know what a stellar human being he is. His prelim was this week, and it was basically just another prelim where his court-appointed attorney asked for another continuance, and apparently the judge said, "This is your last one." So the next trial date, hearing date, is set for Monday, I believe, May 3rd. So that's on my calendar. Hopefully, by then, the state of California will be a little more open and I will be able to attend and give you an even better update. But that is all I know right now. So in 2012, actually, I guess it was probably 2011, is when Jessica meets Matthew Puccio online. And she invites him to move into her sweet little home that her mother has helped her set up in Urbana, Ohio. Now, I had issues with why did it take so long for anyone to do a welfare check on Jessica. But I understand now after doing more research. And by the way, there is some great research by a journalist named Matt Sanctus, who writes for the Springfield News Sun. He, I guess, was a crime reporter at the time that this happened, but now I believe he focuses more on business journalism. But he is a really good writer, and he was actually granted the only interview with Matthew Puccio after he was imprisoned for Jessica's murder. And we have to take what he says with like a salt lick of salt, because he has 5 different stories about what happened and tries to deflect. It just, nothing that he says really makes sense. A little bit here, a little bit there lines up with the evidence, but I don't know that we'll ever really know. And the fact that he brought in 4 other people to help him, is just, and they complied. That's the part that, there are certain groups that you wish weren't as loyal to each other. And if this is what a Juggalo does, yeah, that makes it even more awful that this is a group. So Matthew Puccio convinces Jessica Sacco to go off of her bipolar meds. And I did not understand why between March 22nd, when her mother was unable to get a hold of her, until March 30th, when she was finally discovered, why it took so long. She's 21. She's an adult. I get it. She's 21 and a half. I didn't understand. I got very upset and thought, did no one care for her? And that isn't true. Her mother had shown up several times and asked to speak with her. And Matthew said, she's not here. She's at a friend's. I don't know where she is. And at one point before the murder, Jessica's mother said, I don't feel this is good for you. I don't think you're doing well. Is this what you want? And Jessica said, yes. So her mother had to walk away. And I get it. She's an adult. You can't anticipate that your 21-year-old daughter who met a pile of shit on Facebook, who has convinced her to stop taking her bipolar medication, and she is withdrawing and becoming more depressed and more of a loner. You can't, I guess you could show up with chloroform in a van and...
Yeah, then you get arrested. Right.
Thank you. I mean, I just was so upset with her mother until I realized her mother tried. Her mother really did try. And you don't know that something like this is going to happen. You can't possibly know that something like this is going to happen. So one of Matthew Puccio's stories is that he found a text that Jessica said she was going to kill him. I don't know if that has ever been proven, if that has ever been found. I cannot find any source that the police downloaded her device, got any information like that. I can't find anything like that. But you'll see he changes the story yet again. Part of, I think, the problem, this was a small place that was probably comfortable enough for her and him, but he had invited a couple that he had known, I guess basically his entire life. He invited them to come and stay. And they're a married couple.
Oh my God.
I know.
That's just always the kiss of death.
Yeah, and they came from California to stay with Jessica and Matthew in Urbana, Ohio. And that is Andrew and Kandis Forney. Now they're married, and they're a little bit weird. I'm sure you probably can figure that out. Now, to make things, they're also Juggalos. To make things a little more complicated, a couple from Urbana that were also Juggalos recently met them online, and they are involved in the dismemberment and distribution of Jessica's body 90 miles south of Urbana, all the way, into Cincinnati and in northern Kentucky. And that's Sharon Cook and Christopher Wright. So there's 3 couples now, 2 couples living together in a small space, and had been for several months. I think it was fall of 2011 when they moved in. So it's March of 2012, and Jessica is not answering the phone after March 22nd. And now here's where a little bit differs in the story. Her landlord says that on March 30th, her mother had he had allowed her mother to gain entrance to the apartment. And she opened the door and the bathroom door was locked. Now, I get it. Maybe her mom didn't have a way to get into the bathroom, or, but she left and said the bathroom door was locked. And I don't know if she was going to get the police or what exactly happened, but the landlord story, which differs from the story of the tipster who sent us this case. The landlord says, I got curious when her mother said she could not get into the bathroom. And I went in with my key and opened the bathroom door and saw the body and called the police. Now, a difference of opinion. The tipster who sent us this, said, we responded on a welfare check. No one had heard from her. Went in to make sure that the scene was safe. It was a total mess. There was trash everywhere. She was in a bathtub with a comforter pulled up over her. So the initial officer who looked at her thought that she had committed suicide. And this tipster who sent us the information said he went back in while they were looking for an ID for her and this is where this little bit is fascinating and lets you know how accomplished this tipster is and how smart. The tipster used a pen and moved the curtain back a little further and said, there's blood on the side of the tub at the end where her feet are, or should have been. And the tipster asked the officer to come back in and said, I don't think people who kill themselves leave blood like this. And the officer said, you're right, and we're going to back out of here. And
wow.
And that's what they did. And they called the Ohio BCI. The BCI realized that she's been dismembered. There's a hole in her shoulder where she had been stabbed. They cut all of her fingers off. They tried to cut her up. They wanted to remove all of her limbs and her head and realized it was too difficult. So they, it's a difficult thing to cut up a body.
Oh, God.
I just want to say that just in case you're thinking about it.
Fucking idiot.
Right.
Horrible, evil people.
Thank you. So Matthew Puccio calls his friends and they all commence to the apartment where he cuts her up and gives different parts, and they take her in different cars and drop her everywhere from Cincinnati to northern Kentucky. Now, one of the locations that she was, a leg, I believe, was supposed to have been found, and this is terribly gruesome and I'm sorry, was in Covington, Kentucky. And I think that is a broad term, Covington, because I think it was probably it was a little further south in Kenton County because it was on Hands Pike, I believe, which is not really, I guess the address could be Covington, but also things have changed since I moved, and, streets and areas are different, but yeah. So it's according to the tipster, they're really not smart. And it only takes about a week to find them all. Matthew Puccio was found staying at a friend's house. And he, is just... at one point he says he says to a judge, I'm clinically insane. I think you're just a selfish prick. I think if you had an excuse like clinical insanity, if that's even a term, it still wouldn't be enough.
He just burst out in court and said that?
He says to a judge at one of his hearings, which you're going to find out there's another one. It wasn't a burst out, but he just said, I'm receiving disability payments because I'm clinically insane. I don't know.
He's just a real Phi Beta Kappa here.
Yeah, he's something else. And he is a complete narcissist. And this very extensive interview with Matt Sanctus from the Springfield News-Sun is interesting in that it's the profile of a monster. And sweet little Jessica is just, she wanted what we all want. She wanted to be loved. Her mother, was like, her mother Sue was like, the internet and Facebook and these things were all that she wanted. And she just wanted someone to love. She wanted someone to love her. And it's heartbreaking. It's really, really heartbreaking. She had recently moved back to Ohio because her mother, offered. She had grown up and lived in California. According to a couple of friends, she was very smart. She was very funny. She was very kind, but she had been bullied. I don't know why. I mean, she's a very pretty girl. I guess she was shy. She's a lovely girl, smart girl. And she had been in a relationship with a man in Texas, and that had soured. So her mom said, just come to Urbana. I'm going to help you out. We'll get you settled. And she did. She tried and she did for a while until she meets Matthew Puccio. Now, Matthew says that she had stabbed him and he had actually gone to, I think it's University Mercy Hospital. I don't know if those records were ever released. But he said he went back to the apartment and then killed her. And his description of killing her is one of the more awful, chilling things you'll ever hear. Neighbors are like, I never saw her upset. She's so polite. She's very kind. This was James Latimer, who lived next door. She was generally happy. I didn't see any indication of problems. I didn't see any health issues. She had a great sense of humor. It's like once he moves in and gets her to stop taking her meds, things really spiral. And then he moves in Andrew and Kandis Forney, and things really get bad. Now, I don't know how much of what he says is true, what Matthew Puccio says is true. But he said, they just never got along. They always argued. They always fought. Jessica would blow up at them for no reason. And then she would blow up at me for things that they were doing. And then they would blow up at me for things Jessica was doing. So he's the victim here. He's the guy who's just had...
of course. Naturally.
such a hard time. And I will say, the description of his childhood that he gives, doesn't sound great. It also doesn't sound like something you can't overcome. He actually went to private schools for a while in California. He was raised by his grandparents. He, wanted to get his father in his life, and he lived with him for a few years until he moved out because they had a fight. By then his grandparents had downsized to a smaller home. They didn't have room for him, so he lived in group homes. And this couple, Kandis and Andrew, he'd known for most of his life, like 2 decades, and he was 25. And he knew them because they went to the same school and the same church. They all went to the same church together. I don't know how someone calls you and says, well, I've killed my girlfriend and I need you to help me dispose of her. We're going to cut her up.
And they do it.
And they do it. it doesn't look like he has some sort of magical hold over these people, but maybe he is some sort of Svengali who can, get people to do his bidding, because his description of what he did to Jessica is, I don't know anything else to say but bizarre. So apparently he had a stab wound and that he says was from Jessica trying to kill him. And he goes to, it's Mercy Memorial Hospital. He gets the wound stitched up, and it obviously wasn't a bad one. And he goes home. Now, Matt Sanctus asks, why did you go back home? And he said, I've been asking myself that for the entire time. I still can't come up with the answer. So he goes back home. He argues with Jessica because apparently, according to him, she had tried to stab him. And he says that she asked him to kill her.
Oh, okay.
It gets worse. He said he held a knife over her and she pulled it down into her own abdomen.
God.
I will tell you that the forensics proved that no stab wounds were her cause of death. None of them were deep enough to have nicked any organs or arteries. He said that they wrapped the wound and it took him hours to kill her with a plastic bag.
Okay.
He said that she said, I don't want to die, but I know I have to for what I did.
For what she did? For what? For stabbing him in the... Is that what he's saying?
Mm-hmm. He also said the average person would have fought back, or at least dialed 911, but she never did. Sure, because you've gotten her off of her meds. She probably doesn't know what's going on or what's going to happen. She's under some sort of weird spell that you have. He has other quotes from her that I will be saying later, but I just don't understand. I don't know that I believe anything that comes out of his mouth, because basically everything is always about him.
Well, do we know what her cause of death was? Was it
suffocation?
Suffocation?
Yes. Yep. So he managed to cut off her legs, and Andrew and Kandis, his oldest friends, help him hide, parts of her body and transport them in different, vehicles. The other couple, Sharon Cook and Christopher Wright, both Urbana residents, by the way, use their van. Can you imagine numerous vehicles used to take parts of a 21-year-old girl and dump them, scatter them over 90 miles?
Just because your friend asked you to.
Mm-hmm.
I have a bulletin for anybody out there that wants to call me or Melissa. Any old friend of ours calls us up and says, I've just cut up my girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, and I need you to help dispose of the body parts. We're going to hang up we're going to say, sure, we'll be right over. And then we're going to hang up and call the police.
Right.
Just so you know.
Right.
Because we're normal people.
Well, one of us is. I'm
Well,
just kidding.
all
Both
right.
of us are mostly. Yeah. I don't know how you talk for other people into the crazy shit you do, and unless maybe you pull that Juggalo card, like,
Yeah, family.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, producer Mark and I have a favorite story from a comic, Joe DeRosa, who explains he's a bit of a money whore, but he took a gig. Most comics are, right? You got to make a living, right? He took a gig opening for the Insane Clown Posse, and he thinks, and he's pretty smart, and he thinks he knows what's going on, but he gets picked up by someone and driven out to the woods. So I guess a lot of their shows are like, gatherings in the woods.
Yes, and apparently the van had no back seat.
Right. There were no seats. He had to sit on the floor of the van. And he said he's picked up by a guy that, scares him, but he's like, all right, whatever. So he gets taken to, the venue, which is probably a really great stage out in the middle of the woods. And, nobody wants to see a comic. They want to see their shitty favorite band that can't play music and wears crappy makeup. And he was eating a plate full. He was dying on stage. And a woman says something, and he calls her the C word. And apparently...
You don't want to do that.
Yeah, not in front of your Juggalo friends.
Not in front of a bunch of Juggalos. No.
I guess, I don't know how many, we'll say hundreds. I wouldn't want to say thousands because that would make it sound like they're more popular than they are. But hundreds of weirdos start yelling, chanting in unison, family, family. So he thought he wasn't going to make it out alive. He did. And he gets paid. And then the next year they say, hey, you were great. You want to do it again? He's like, yeah, okay. So he did it again, maybe only twice, but I guess maybe Matthew Puccio chanted family enough that his friends all decided. And I mean, Sharon and Christopher were new friends, like within the last few weeks.
I mean, there's just a disconnect between life and reality or something. I mean, these are breathing human beings, but they have no connection to life, to the real world.
Right.
I mean, if all you have to do is just cite some sort of weird
band.
Well, just some loyalty that is some fake loyalty that you will do anything for your fellow family member, even hide body parts. That's just, you don't have any connection to reality.
Right. Well, that is true. I think it's fascinating that Matthew Puccio was an ex-Marine. I don't know how he got into the Marines, but obviously he didn't stay there long. He was 25. And I mean, and I don't know, maybe when you meet someone because you're both in the Juggalo subculture, I don't know that you would think that that's going to be something that would last, but maybe. Whatever it is, there's no excuse for, I mean, it's just, I have to say, I feel very sad for Jessica's mother, Sue, because at one point, she's done a lot, and I'm sure this is going to haunt her forever, but she had done a lot to help Jessica get back on her feet. And Jessica kept making, and this is not victim blaming, because the girl, was kept away from her meds and kept away from her family and friends, but there must have been still part of her that knew what was happening wasn't right, because she at one point, said, look, these people are moving in and now he's got these other people coming over a lot and I don't even feel welcome in my own place. Can I come and stay with you? And Sue said, you know what? I just can't. I can't take any more chaos. She said, I know. She said, we'd been through so much in the last couple of months with her and Matthew, and I needed a break. And that's the hardest part to live with, hindsight.
Oh, yeah. I mean, she must just,
Of course. She said, you wish you hadn't have done that because you feel like you should have done something. And she said not long after that is when Jessica stopped responding to her text messages and she didn't post anything on Facebook. So... the way it goes is Matthew stabbed Jessica in the abdomen, even though he said she pulled the knife into her own stomach. He then texted his friends and said, I stabbed her. They all meet in the living room. And then hours later, with her stab wound, she's still alive. Matthew suffocates her with a plastic bag. He said she was crying and said, I don't really want to die, but I understand I have to for what I did.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. They all help him dismember her. All 5 of them work in unison to do this. And they get tired and they take a break and they go eat at McDonald's.
I'm going to puke.
Yeah. And they come back and finish the job and then scatter her remains in Cincinnati and in northern Kentucky.
There's just nothing to say to this.
Right. So Matthew Puccio is given 45 years. Well, he's given life, but he's not eligible for parole for 45 years. Andrew Forney is sentenced to 10 years. Kandis Forney is sentenced to 6 years. Sharon Cook is sentenced to 3 years, and Chris Wright is sentenced to 4 years.
What?
I don't know the reasoning for these numbers.
They should have all gotten life in prison.
Yeah, I think so too.
Every single one of them.
But even though Matthew Puccio has given at least 5 versions of what actually happened to Jessica, he finally pleads guilty to stabbing, suffocating, and dismembering Jessica, and he's sentenced to life in prison. Now, this is going back in time to let you know what was going on, and even more remarkably sad. I don't know if this was a small apartment. This was a duplex, right? I find it odd that no one, including the landlord who lived next door, would know there's an issue when he rented it to one girl and then her boyfriend moves in and then 2 other couples. Well, one couple moves in and one couple's there a lot. And then this is sort of the topper, that another heartbreaking thing. Matthew Puccio pleads guilty to a single count of unlawful sexual contact with a minor. What had happened is he had found a minor online, probably through the Juggalo subculture, and got her up from Texas to Urbana. And she stayed at the home with Jessica, and sometime between February 6th and February 14th of 2012, he had sexual contact with her. And then Jessica is murdered a month later in March. So they were saying that this juvenile had run away from home and stayed with Puccio and Jessica at her apartment on West Light Street. But her parents figured out where she was and get her back to Texas. Now, at the time, Puccio was charged with interference of custody because she's underage. But then, after he kills Jessica, this juvenile says to investigators in Texas, he raped me when I was there at the apartment. I thought I was just going to stay with a friend, and he raped me. So Matthew Puccio is given 3 extra years.
Oh, 3 whole extra years.
3 extra years adding on to his life sentence, which he won't be eligible for parole for 45 years, which means he would be 70. But he also has to register as a Tier 2 sex offender. Now, some people are like, why would you even prosecute him for this, rape of a juvenile? He's not going to get out of prison. The prosecutor said the teenage victim deserves justice, and it's important that he be labeled as a sex offender. When this defendant someday comes up for parole, we want the parole board to know that not only is he a violent offender, a violent murderer, but he's a sex offender.
Exactly.
And Jessica Sacco's mother, Sue Tainer, said, I hope that we never find out that there's another girl who is Matthew Puccio's victims. And I hope that prison shows him the same mercy that he showed his victims. He shows them no mercy, and I hope the prison shows him exactly what he showed my daughter. So I'm going to say that while it's good to know that they were rounded up, gathered up, arrested, and convicted, it still feels hollow because, there's that French saying, fallait à deux, where two people get together and maybe do something dastardly that they would never have done separately. I don't know what you call it when 5 juggalos get together. And, this was not a heat of the moment. This was not, I accidentally pushed her and she hit her head on the fireplace. This was not, I was cleaning my gun. And this was hours and hours of planning and killing and stabbing and suffocating. And Matthew Puccio saying she asked him to stab her. Please stab me because you found a text that said I was going to kill you. Matthew Puccio said she started crying and told me I wish I didn't have to die, but I understand what I did. She was pleading with me to slash her throat, slash her wrist, do something. And I told her, no, I can't do that to you. And then she told me to stab her. So I held my hand above her stomach and she grabbed my wrist and pulled the knife into her stomach. And Matthew Puccio says Jessica Sacco's last words were, I still love you and I forgive you. And you know what, Matthew Puccio? I don't. I don't forgive you. And it's not my place to forgive you, but I don't. And more cowbell.
If you'd like to support this podcast, go to patreon.com/justthetipsters.